Welcome back, fellow music teachers, to session number 2, Strategies for Assessment. So let's get to it. The performance standard that we look at the beginning of every session, so we're well familiar with them, is performance standard number 5, assessment strategies, which means that we include diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment strategies and instruments, rubrics, that are valid and appropriate for the content and student population. So that means appropriate for our music classroom and the different learning levels that are in that class. So our learning target for this session is to identify strategies for assessment in the music classroom. So now let's look more intensely at some of those methods and strategies for assessment. Let's talk about informal assessment, also known as check for understandings. Music teachers daily and continuously informally assess student knowledge and performance with informal observation and feedback, whether it's when students are singing songs, playing instruments individually, or as a group. We're always listening and providing commentary. Use more air to support that note. Hold that note out longer. Listen to those around you and stay on beat. Keep a steady tempo. Those are just general comments we give daily and continuously as students perform in our classroom. These informal assessments can easily render informal data for directing or redirecting instruction. This informal data, you can keep track of it so that you can show student progress on a piece of paper with a list of names. It can be that easy for you to do. When you hear yourself continuously giving feedback that is on the same content or the same specific technique, then you know that that is something that you need to revisit with the class as a whole to help students master and regain understanding of that skill or that content knowledge. Here are some examples of informal assessments and check for understandings. Verbal questions. What letter is on the second line of the staff? Did you play that exactly together with 4 different notes? That's verbal questioning. Pair activity, when students work together, and you can move around and see students working in pairs, which ones have the understanding or the knowledge for that standard that they need to continue working and moving forward. Ticket out the door is one of the most common ones we've heard about, where students write on a piece of paper or tell you something verbally as they walk out the door. The ticket out the door. Also, many teachers have the green, red, yellow, thumbs up, hand in the middle, or thumbs down. Not always my favorite, but the green, yellow, and red are certainly. Red means I'm not ready to go on yet. I don't understand that. Green means yes, I think I got it. Although sometimes we know that students will often hold up the green or the yellow just to kind of make sure that the other students don't respond to them in a particular way or make certain judgments about what they know or may not know. And finally, a standard focus center activity. If you set up your classroom in centers, differentiated learning centers, then certainly you can gather lots of informal data as your students rotate in groups through that particular center. Now let's talk about different types of assessment and those strategies that go with it. So in my mind, there are 2 different types of general assessments in music class. One of those assessments is the cognitive or the knowledge-based assessment. When we think about music, most quickly, this is referred to as music theory. Music theory requires us to know note names, accidentals, durations of beats, names of note symbols, things that we can identify easily without necessarily having an instrument in our hands. Performance-based skills and assessments are those that actually have our students demonstrate the knowledge of music and their ability to perform that through their vocal instrument, body percussion, playing on a particular instrument like xylophone, guitar, or any of those. And the images on that slide, I've kind of reiterated that with, you can use a pen and pencil, you can use a technology computer-based assessment or student questioning throughout the room to gather some of that content or knowledge-based assessment data. Students can play, like I mentioned before, guitars or xylophones or sing, and you can gather performance-based or skills-based data for your assessment. So let's take a look at the formative assessment strategies. Formative assessments direct our instruction and inform the students of their progress. So let's take a look at some examples of content assessed as knowledge. For example, a vocabulary quiz, a note reading demonstration on treble clef or bass clef or the grand staff, music symbol identification, half note, whole note, quarter note. Duration recognition or identification. Whole notes are 4 beats in value. Half notes are 2 beats in value. 16th notes receive a quarter of a beat. Instrument family categorization, woodwind, brass, percussion, strings, even with younger students recognizing membranophones, idiophones, any type of music instrument family categorization like that. And finally, even identifying and recognizing musical eras is certainly an example of content-assessed knowledge. Summative strategies are the final strategy that we've talked about, or method that we've talked about. Summative assessments drive instruction and can even drive or should drive curriculum choices. So as we assess students at the end of a 6-week or 8-week unit, or maybe it's over 2 units, or maybe it's even over the course of a semester or a year, when we're done with those assessments, we should take a look at that data and allow that data to drive our instruction. If we see that a particular standard or domain within a standard that is consistently not mastered over 4 or 5 classes in the same grade level, then certainly we will want to take a look at our curriculum, what we've designed to deliver to the students, and how that's impacted those standards, and how we can refine that to allow students to better achieve those standards. Summative assessments should pair with a skill-based demonstration and a knowledge or content-based demonstration. So a 10 or 15 question quiz and then a performance piece, those two paired together would make a summative assessment. That's a great strategy and consideration as you plan for summative assessing. And finally, summative assessments are often performance-based and should provide the student with a rubric identifying characteristics and qualities of performance. And I think that we are all familiar with the rubric. Rubrics divide performance into usually 4 categories at the elementary level and sometimes 4 or 5 at the middle school level. And those categories would be, for example, at the elementary level, a rubric would have 4 different categories, and those categories generally fall with does not meet, developing, meets, or exceeds the standards. And then within that rubric, you provide with the student what it means to meet the standard. If we're playing a song on xylophone or a guitar, what does that mean if you want the students to meet the standard? That goes back to the tips that we had in our last session for planning. What does the standard require that the students demonstrate, and what am I going to design as an instrument so that the students can effectively communicate that and demonstrate that to me? So that is certainly the most important part of designing the rubric, is allowing the students to see what is it going to mean to get a 3 or a B or an A. What are we looking for? How many points can you get at the middle school level for this part of the rubric, for this part of the rubric? Certainly important as you communicate to your students how they will demonstrate performance skills to you in your music classroom. And I'll briefly want to talk about technology in music assessment and really be an advocate here for some ways that music assessment using technology can be beneficial. The first is it's quick and easy grading without hundreds of papers. Music teachers at the elementary and middle school level both teach a lot of students, 150 students, some teach 600 students. Using the paper pencil method and grading all of those papers individually can just be so tedious and take so much time that you never feel as if you're super successful, or you have to invest so much time in it that you don't have time to do the other things that help you be an effective teacher. Quick and easy feedback without grading hundreds of papers is a benefit of technology, using technology for assessment. It's engaging for students. The technology platforms that I recommend, that I use, lots of teachers use, are very engaging for students. It's instant data. You can download lots of data into Excel spreadsheets, or they have reports right there in the platform. I'm going to show you some of those. And it's great for demonstrating student growth as you visit with your evaluating administrator. You can show them this is a particular class. Here's a baseline data. Here's where we started. Here's where we ended. And it's super easy to collect that data. And finally, it can be used for informal, formative, and summative assessments. If you see along your course of instruction that you assess a group of students, let's say with the ticket out the door, and you recognize that they're not familiar with the instrument families as well as you wanted them to be, then the next time we take a computer quiz, and that quiz is allowing us to select which instruments go with it, which instruments go with which family, and then you're able to allow them to practice a little bit and kind of get a better understanding. So it's just used as a point of practice. It can be used as a formative check where you actually gather that data and keep it, and it's part of their grade building to the summative, and certainly you can use it for summative assessments. So in our next session, I'm going to walk you through how to make a quizzes assessment that is going to be beneficial for you as a pre-test and a post-test, or as a formative assessment. I'm also going to help you, if you haven't already, develop a Flipgrid for your students to use to show performance for you or demonstrate performance standards. And finally, we're going to visit a way that students can show you through creating a presentation some of that content-based knowledge that you want them to have and you want to assess. So join us for our next session, Technology and Music Assessment, and I'll see you there, session 3.